For 40 years, you are told the same story. Work hard, pay your national insurance, build up your 35 qualifying years, and at the end of the race, there will be a safety net waiting for you. In 2026, that net does exist. It pays £241.30 a week, and it is stretched roughly 2 inches above the ground. Because if your entire life is funded by £241 a week, you are not living in retirement. You are performing a weekly miracle of accounting, every single week, without applause, without a holiday from it, and without anyone in Westminster acknowledging that you are doing it at all. This is the arithmetic of the invisible squeeze. Start with the raw number. The full new state pension rose by 4.8% this April, under the triple lock. That takes it to £12,547 a year. On paper, that is the biggest cash rise in a generation. Now hold it against the benchmark. The PLSA, the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association, publishes the Retirement Living Standards, the closest thing Britain has to an official definition of enough. Their minimum standard for a one-person household sits at around £13,400 a year. And here is where most commentators stop. They subtract one from the other, find a shortfall of under £1,000, and tell you the state pension almost covers the basics. They have missed the single most important line in the entire document. That £13,400 figure assumes you own your home outright. It excludes rent. It excludes any mortgage still running. It quietly assumes the largest bill in British life has simply vanished. For a pensioner who is still renting, and there are more of them every year, you have to put the roof back into the equation. Do that, and the honest floor, for a modest single life in 2026 lands nearer £18,000 a year, which means the real gap is not £800, it is roughly £5,400. That is about £105 a week of missing money, every week, for the rest of your life. Nobody sends you a letter about that. There is no statement, no notification, no red envelope. The gap simply gets absorbed, quietly, privately, one decision at a time, inside your own head. And that is where the real cost lives. Because when you survive on £241 a week, your brain never fully switches off. It is permanently overclocked by the price of food. Call it supermarket bandwidth. It is the mental processing power a person burns standing in an aisle, doing arithmetic that a wealthier shopper never has to do. Here is what that looks like in practice. A block of butter at Tesco goes up by 30p. For most of the country, that is nothing. It is a rounding error. It does not even register. For a pensioner living entirely on the state pension, 30p is a financial heart attack, because there is no slack anywhere in the system to absorb it. That 30p has to be found, and it can only be found by taking it from somewhere else. So the bus trip into town gets cancelled, or the coffee with a friend on Thursday gets quietly dropped, with an excuse invented so nobody has to know why. This is the menu of compromise. Every item you add to the trolley silently deletes something from your life. Not something dramatic. Something small and social and load-bearing. That is the part the spreadsheets never capture. The state pension does not just limit what you eat. It slowly closes down the reasons you leave the house. Now think about what wealth actually buys. A rich retirement is not a yacht. It is not the home counties. It is something far more mundane than that. A rich retirement is the ability to buy what you need, at the moment you need it. A survival retirement is standing near the chiller cabinet at Sainsbury's at 7 in the evening, waiting for a member of staff to come round with the reduction gun, because that is the only way the loaf of bread fits the budget. Economists call this the bandwidth tax. When money is scarce, the brain reallocates enormous cognitive resources to managing that scarcity, and it takes that capacity from everywhere else, from memory, from patience, from sleep. So the yellow sticker is not a bargain. It is a second job. It is a job with no wages, no pension, and no retirement date. It requires you to organise your entire evening around a shelf, in your 70s, in the rain, for a saving of £1.20. And critically, you cannot ever stop doing it, because the moment you stop optimising, the numbers stop working. Then comes the resilience test, because the true measure of a retirement income is not how it performs on a good week. It is what happens when something breaks. Your car fails its MOT. The garage quotes £300 for the work. For a household with savings, that is an irritation. A phone call, forgotten in a fortnight. For a household running on £241 a week, £300 is a catastrophic event. That is not a repair bill. That is your entire discretionary budget for the next 3 months, gone in a single afternoon. No presents for the grandchildren, no trips out, no margin at all until roughly the middle of the autumn. Or a tooth goes, an emergency denture repair, a cracked crown, one of those unglamorous, unavoidable costs that nobody puts in a retirement brochure. Same maths, same 3-month blackout. And this is what people misunderstand about pensioner poverty in Britain. It is very rarely a slow decline. It is a series of small, ordinary accidents landing on a budget with zero shock absorption. A wealthy retirement absorbs friction. A survival retirement transmits every single impact directly into your quality of life. Now for the detail that almost nobody has noticed. The frozen personal allowance sits at £12,570. It has not moved for years, and it is not moving anytime soon. The full new state pension now sits at £12,547. Look at those two numbers again. The gap between them is £22. £22. That is the entire remaining distance between the basic state pension and the point at which HMRC formally considers you a taxpayer on it. For the first time in the history of the modern system, millions of pensioners are one triple lock increase away from being taxed on the very benefit they depend on to survive. And anyone with even a small private pension on top has already crossed that line. Every extra pound taxed at the basic rate from the first pound. There is a genuine absurdity buried in that. The government uprates the state pension to protect pensioners from the cost of living, and the frozen threshold quietly takes a share of the increase straight back. You are not being given a rise. You are being handed a number that is very carefully going nowhere. So what does it actually feel like? It is any quiet morning. The house is still. You open the banking app on your phone, not because you need to buy anything, but because you need to know. And you sit there doing the sum you have already done 4 times this week, days until the next payment. Money left. Everything that still has to come out. That is the moment the illusion cracks, because you were promised freedom. What you were handed was a very tight cage. With the door left open, you are free to go anywhere you like, provided it costs nothing. Here is what actually separates a pensioner who is comfortable from a pensioner who is surviving. It is not the house. It is not the postcode. It is not even, really, the size of the income. It is the buffer, call it the resilience pot. Money held in an ISA or a SIP, sitting quietly in the background doing absolutely nothing until the MOT fails, or the tooth goes, or the boiler warranty expires. The wealthy pensioner and the surviving pensioner may face the identical £300 bill. The difference is that one of them pays it and forgets it, and the other one restructures their entire autumn around it. That is the whole game, not the income, the shock absorber underneath it. And if you are still working, this is the single most useful thing you can take from this video. You are not building a pension pot to fund luxury. You are building it to buy indifference, to make £300 stop mattering. So, how are pensioners surviving on £241 a week? Brilliantly, ingeniously, with a level of financial discipline that most people half their age could not sustain for a fortnight. And that is exactly the problem. Because we have quietly turned personal excellence into a substitute for structural adequacy. Surviving on the state pension in 2026 is not a character flaw, and it is not a budgeting failure. It is a mathematical trap, built out of a frozen threshold, an excluded housing cost, and a benchmark that assumes a life most pensioners do not have. Real wealth in 2026 is not a bigger number in an account, it is silence. It is the ability to walk through an ordinary day, the shop, the car, the dentist, the bus, without hearing the constant, exhausting clicking of a mental calculator that never, ever switches off. If you learn something, hit like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.